Hello YouTube, this is Frugal, and this is my view of the Microsoft Flight 2020 announcements. Now I'll put out a little trigger warning here. I did a video on this before and I pulled it. I seemed to trigger a whole bunch of you into getting very upset and calling me every name under the sun, so I pulled that video down. In your defense, that video was quite vitriolic. It was kind of off the cuff. It wasn't well researched. So what I did after pulling that video down was I wrote a whole bunch of notes on what I want to say and what my point is, and in particular why I am not excited about the release or the upcoming release of Microsoft's new flight simulator. Let's give you a little bit of background first. At E3 this year, while FS Expo was underway in Orlando, Microsoft announced the return of Microsoft Flight Simulator. It is apparently coming in 2020, and it's the trailer that you're watching right now. And in that trailer at the start, it says captured in real-time 4K and powered by satellite data and Azure AI. Now, I'm not going to do a frame-by-frame breakdown, but I will tell you what I saw in that trailer point by point. So the trailer does show volumetric clouds, fog, and mist. It shows cloud shadowing on the underlying terrain, and we do see sunlit cloud tops with self-shadowing underneath, making for some very realistic looking clouds. It features high resolution ground meshes that Microsoft chose to show off with numerous shots of detailed mountain ranges. We see atmospheric scattering in those shots as well, which is where the scenery in the distance kind of fades out to eventually vanish. There are incredibly dense cityscapes in the video, animated water with reflections, at least around the shorelines. There's even a shot of Chicago and the old Meigs Field airfield with low-lying fog draped around the bases of skyscrapers, all very impressive indeed. In terms of the aircraft, we don't see very many, but the couple that are shown do have PBR materials and reflections, as well as HDR effects. There's one shot of an aircraft in a hangar, and the hangar doors slide back and let in light from the outside, and the effect is quite dazzling. A busy airport is shown with animated pushback tugs, and a cockpit of an Airbus is shown with accurate lighting and shadowing. There's also accurate and detailed night lighting in one shot over Dubai as the sun sets, and weather is also shown with a very active looking stormfront building approaching an airport. Carrying on with weather, there are animated rain effects on windshields, and in terms of animations outside the cockpit, we see flocks of animated flamingos flying over a tropical seascape. There are also shots of pyramids in Egypt with accurate texturing and, more importantly, realistic autogen of the surrounding areas, as well as busy and animated city streets elsewhere and photorealistic shots of the ground from high elevation. In some shots, there are also multiple aircraft, implying built-in multiplayer, and aerobatics as well, implying really solid netcode. There's also animated wildlife in some shots over Africa, and finally sloped runways on a shot of Courchevel in France. Now, on the product's webpage, Microsoft did answer the community, and they said that the, in quotes, emphasis is on the word simulator. This was a concern that I had, particularly since they linked the sim to the word Xbox. Xbox, of course, now being their gaming platform, not just the Xbox console. So they were keen to point out the emphasis is on the word simulator. They also said, in quotes, designed for PC, but optimized for multi-platform support, e.g. Xbox, and again, in quotes, that they will have support for third-party content development. We are aware of the concerns in the current ecosystem and we are working to address them. All in all then, this is a trailer for a new Microsoft Sim and an announcement which would appear to address all the concerns we as simmers would have about a new simulator. So, why am I not excited? Well, there's a number of areas to look at. Let's first look at Microsoft's history with Flight Simulator. Now, after the purchasing of the rights to Bruce Artwick's Flight Simulator, Microsoft rebranded it as their own, and they released new versions and updates almost every 2 years, from 1982 up to the release of FSX in 2006. And yes, I have used every single version. In February 2012, they released a new platform which they called MS Flight, and that was aimed at bringing new people into the world of simming. It was, of course, a universal flop, and as a result, MS Flight was cancelled just 5 months later. Now, Robert Randazzo of PNDG recently said about the new sim, in 2005, Microsoft began exploring how to monetize the add-on market for themselves, and MS Flight was the ultimate effort there, forcing developers such as PNDG to work solely through Microsoft's marketplace, and an attempt by Microsoft to move customers towards a subscription model. This is actually, except for the subscription part, the same model that Dovetail followed as well, and as a result, scant few developers moved over to Dovetail's platform. Now, the screenshots in this trailer also showed aircraft registrations as AS/MGS. Now, MGS stands for Microsoft Game Studios. AS could imply a reformation of the Aces game studio, which is the team that built FSX. However, all the Aces team members were fired from Microsoft in January 2009, and the team was shut down because they had delivery delays in bringing a new sim out, and they kept on needing more and more staff to keep up with what the community wanted in a sim platform. In October of that year, 50 of them formed Cascade Game Foundry, and that team recently released Infinite Scuba in November, in fact, last year on Steam, which means Cascade Game Foundry, made up of former Aces members, is still very, very active and still doing its own thing, and it's hard to imagine they would be looking at developing a flight sim on the side. Now, PMDG was also, back in the midst of time, part of a consortium. This was actually not well known until PMDG recently publicized it, but they were involved as part of a consortium to purchase the rights from Microsoft to FSX. Microsoft, according to Robert Randazzo, in quotes, would insist that it had the right to recapture any development work done if they were to decide to re-enter the marketplace, end quotes. Now, I don't think it's totally off the wall then to assume that Microsoft put that same clause into the agreement between them and Dovetail, when Dovetail licensed FSX and built Dovetail Flight Sim World on top of it. Now, that's very interesting because, again, going back in time, if we do go back in time and we look at early access footage of Dovetail's Flight Sim World, what do we see? Well, we see atmospheric scattering, the same as in this MSFS trailer. We see PBR textures and reflections on aircraft, again, the same as in this trailer. Highly detailed autogen and complex land masses, ground shadowing from clouds, detailed rain and weather effects, and so on and so on. Many of the features you're currently seeing in the Microsoft Flight Simulator trailer, we actually already saw in an earlier form in the trailer or the early footage for Dovetail's Flight Sim World. So I don't think it's a huge leap then to presume that perhaps the new sim is built on top of Dovetail's Flight Sim World, which was not a very well received sim. That's just hyperbole and hypothetical guessing on my part, but that's what I'm thinking. Now, going beyond all of that, though, again, looking back at the history of Microsoft Flight Simulator, no Microsoft Flight Simulator has ever had a smooth launch, most taking at least a year to iron things out. The performance of FSX at launch was so atrocious, and it would take some years before Microsoft released the Acceleration Pack, a paid add-on containing fixes for most of FSX's more serious issues. FS9 had similar problems at launch. FS5, even going all the way back in the midst of time, had similar problems as well with performance and bugs and so on. It was only updated to 5.1 some 2 years after its initial launch, and again, that was a paid fix. Following on though, the video trailer does mention powered by satellite data and Azure AI, which brings me to my next point of concern. I think we all know what satellite data means. It means ortho imagery and highly detailed ground texturing worldwide. But what about Azure AI? Well, Azure is Microsoft's cloud computing service, very similar to Amazon's collection of services in AWS. It provides virtual machines, virtual hosting, data storage, asset distribution, and much, much more. It's actually a key in Microsoft's current offerings and a popular service among Microsoft developers, myself included. Azure AI is a set of services built on top of Azure cloud stuff that can be used for, well, artificial intelligence. Cortana in Windows 10 uses it for predictive analysis of what you mean when you speak. Microsoft have also previously demonstrated Azure AI being used to recreate historic architecture to aid in restoration attempts. Presumably then, Azure AI in Microsoft Flight Simulator means it's being used to generate accurate autogen and ground features on top of satellite imagery. Now, the fact that the trailer mentions Azure AI and doesn't just say complex autogen or complex scenery or something like that implies that these are details that are going to be streamed down to the sim from the cloud. So, what happens when your network connection goes down? What happens when Azure goes down? Not unheard of. In May 2019, that happened with a ton of Azure hosted sites going offline for many hours all over the world. More likely, though, is what happens when Microsoft no longer decides to host the platform for your sim. Now, there are two scenarios under which that would happen. Microsoft decides to perhaps leave the flight sim space. again. It's happened twice already. They kind of stopped doing anything after FSX launched, and then when they relaunched Flight, they stopped doing Flight 5 months after it launched. The Flight servers were then turned off soon after the product was officially ended, leaving everybody that was using Flight pretty much dead. Microsoft, the other option, of course, is that Microsoft comes out with a new SIM and wants to force people to switch. Again, not unheard of. Remember on how hard Microsoft pushed us all to update to Windows 10. What happens to your investment in add-ons at that point? Obviously, we would expect and we would hope that our add-ons would be compatible with any new SIM Microsoft build following on from Microsoft's new Flight Simulator, but they don't have to. Microsoft are in the business of making money. There's nothing stopping them forcing a new version on you, turning off support for the old one and telling you you need to rebuy your add-ons. Which brings me to the next point, monetization. Microsoft previously tried very hard to take control of monetization of the third-party space, but they failed. Now, FSX launched prior to the era of DLC, and it's been 7 years since the release of Flight, and in that time, Microsoft have learned a lot about DLC and microtransactions. So undoubtedly, the add-ons that Microsoft are saying they want to support and the third-party content that they want to support are undoubtedly going to be sold through Microsoft's own marketplace. So what controls are there over that third-party marketplace? Will Microsoft favor some developers over another? A strength of the community model that we built around FSX is that it is consumer-led. Competition drives innovation in the current marketplace. We buy what we hear is good, and we have a wealth of choice from all corners of the internet. Will that choice be limited with the introduction of a Microsoft-controlled marketplace for Microsoft Flight Simulator? Also, currently, vendors don't have to pay Microsoft when they build an add-on, but there will undoubtedly be a cut for Microsoft in their own marketplace. Now, we already have add-ons for FSX and Prepared climbing beyond the $100 mark, and despite protests from consumers, developers have frequently been able to offer justification for those costs. Will the cost of add-ons rise even more if there's a percentage now being taken by Microsoft? One has to assume, yes, they will. The next point I want to cover is Microsoft's beneficial absence. The end of FSX's development, the end of Microsoft Flight, led to an explosion of phenomenal sim content everywhere else. X-Plane grew massively in popularity. X-Plane now has study-level aircraft. It has an updated user interface. It is a 64-bit sim with support for PBR textures and reflections, just like in the trailer. Laminar also actively listen and respond rapidly these days to customer and developer requests. It too is powered by satellite data and is growing from strength to strength. There's also now a high degree of crossover with FSX add-ons and developers, and that's increasing. Active Sky, for example, is now available in FSX, Prepared, and X-Plane. You've already seen on my new show, Just Flight, almost every week releasing new add-ons, new aircraft for X-Plane as well as Prepared. Similarly with Coronado, similarly with scenery content from numerous content publishers such as OrbX. Then we have Lockheed Martin's Prepared, which is built on ESP from Microsoft. It too has PBR and reflections. It too is 64-bit. It too has become home to almost all of the previous FSX producers. It is currently in active development. It has a committed team and a committed company behind it. It's not likely to end soon because Lockheed used Prepared for more than just desktop simming that we use it for. Then we have DCS. DCS came onto the scene after FSX. It too features PBR textures and reflections, has accurate weather effects, is 64-bit. DCS World is home to a higher percentage of study-level aircraft than any other desktop sim platform out there. It too is also powered by satellite data. Then we have Aerofly FS2. Again, PBR textures and reflections, again accurate weather effects, again 64-bit. Aerofly FS2 though fills in the gap left by Microsoft Flight. It's improving monthly. It's also getting more and more complex monthly. It features an incredible flight model. We're now just waiting for the complexity in systems simulation in those aircraft to catch up to that incredible flight model. And then we have the outsiders. Fly Inside Sim, for example, a community-driven simulator with a focus on VR, already picking up support from FSX developers. It is currently in active development, and the team are actively listening to the user base to deliver what they want. And then there's Dead Stick, coming soon, highly focused on low-level bush flight, looks incredible, is incredibly detailed, and frankly it would not have been possible, I think, if Microsoft had continued to release sims every 2 years up to this point. All of this is to say that this is leading us to a point of platform fragmentation. If you just take Aerofly, Prepared, and Explain, you have three platforms there increasingly supported by the same publishers. Just like Norbex, for example, publish on all three platforms. Can they support yet another platform? Flight sim is a cottage industry. It's a niche. There are not high profit margins in it. And I think from a business point of view, it doesn't make sense to add yet another platform into the mix. This is why more and more developers now are actively saying that they are not developing for FSX anymore, or that they are diving in with both feet into Explain only. The introduction of another Microsoft sim brings with it a risk that these publishers and developers will have to make a choice. Which user base is going to suffer? If you're going to support currently Aerofly, Prepared, and Explain, let's say that the introduction of Microsoft Flight Simulator means that you drop, I don't know, Prepared? There isn't an easy answer to that other than to say that at least one user base will suffer. That's not a good thing. Talking about Prepared, that brings me on to my next point, the Prepared issue. Microsoft were extremely keen to separate out entertainment rights for their sim from anything else. Lockheed have said very loudly that their platform is, in quotes, not for entertainment. Yet, Lockheed's academic license has the same price point as a mainstream video game. Developers, as a result, have started to adopt Prepared as an entertainment platform. Just look at the upcoming Skypark or Just Flight's Air Hauler 2. Now, Lockheed, to my knowledge, don't outright own the Microsoft DSP license. They license it from Microsoft. So with Microsoft entering the entertainment sim space again, this raises the question of whether or not Microsoft will enforce their rights. They have had zero issue enforcing their rights in other areas in the past. So what would this mean? The obvious answer is that if Microsoft did enter the entertainment flight sim space again, and they are saying they are going to, the obvious answer is that Lockheed will no longer be able to sell an academic version. Now, the best time to do that is on a switch to a new version of Prepared. So let's look at the timescales there. Prepared 1 launched in 2011. 2 launched 2 years later in 2013. 3 launched 2 years later in 2015. And 4 was launched again 2 years later in 2017. That puts us on track for Prepared version 5 launching later this year or early next, which puts it in line with the launch window for Microsoft Flight Simulator. Now, with the exception of version 4, most versions of Prepared have retained backwards compatibility with add-ons for previous versions. So if version 5 comes out with compatibility with version 4 add-ons, but it's restricted to a professional license only, then for a great many of you, your add-on library is going to be pretty much unusable unless you want to cough up $200 to Lockheed, and that will be due to Microsoft Flight Simulator. So in summary, no, I'm not excited for the new platform release. Honestly, there's just not enough solid information around it to get excited at this stage. However, history tells me that this won't be a smooth launch, that we'll have no quality add-ons available for the new platform at the time of launch, and it'll be some time after before we start to see them. So you're playing with a stock sim with stock aircraft. Azure AI means the future of my sim as well now rests firmly with how long Microsoft decide to run their servers for, and they have in the past shut them down on a non-profitable product, i.e. Microsoft Flight. Azure AI also means that Microsoft could pretty much force upgrades on us, and Microsoft's history is to charge for upgrades. So we're effectively just renting the sim, if that's the case. Until we have a lot more information, I'm afraid I'm going to keep on flying with the sims that actually have more features, more add-ons, more complexity, and that are actually here right now. I'll take a look at Microsoft Flight Simulator when it finally becomes available. As always, my name is Frugal. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time, I'll see you all very soon.